Which forgotten side dishes no one makes anymore once rounded out every family dinner and potluck table? In the kitchens of the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, these side dishes carried flavor, comfort, and tradition that made meals feel whole. What does it say that so many have quietly vanished? 7-layer salad was the crown jewel of potlucks in the 70s and 80s, always showing up in its tall glass bowl so everyone could see each colorful layer. The crisp iceberg lettuce went down first, then bright peas, sliced boiled eggs, sharp onions, shredded cheese, and crumbled bacon, all stacked one on top of the other like a rainbow of familiar flavors. The final touch was a thick slathering of mayonnaise dressing spread across the top like frosting, sealing everything in until serving time. This dish was not about being fancy. It was about being filling, showy, and perfect for feeding a crowd. Families loved how it could be prepared ahead and kept in the fridge, ready to unveil at church socials or neighborhood suppers. Children poked through the layers looking for their favorite bites, while adults admired the simple but clever presentation. It was hearty enough to be a meal, but always served as a side dish alongside casseroles or fried chicken. Though rarely made today, 7-layer salad once stood as a proud example of resourceful cooking and community spirit stacked in a bowl. Scalloped potatoes with ham were the definition of comfort food, especially when stretching leftovers was necessary. Thin slices of potato were carefully layered in a casserole dish with bits of ham tucked in between, then bathed in a creamy sauce made from milk or canned soup. As it baked, the potatoes softened into tender layers while the top browned into a golden crust that smelled like home. Grandmothers taught this dish as a way to make a small piece of meat go far, feeding an entire family with just a handful of ham scraps. It was often served at Sunday dinners, where it sat proudly next to roast chicken or green beans. Children never complained about eating potatoes this way because the salty ham pieces were little surprises hidden inside. It was warm, filling, and dependable, a dish that made every bite taste richer than the ingredients really were. Today, it has nearly disappeared, replaced by easier boxed mixes, but scalloped potatoes with ham once carried families through countless meals with its simple charm. Copper penny salad got its name from the shiny round carrot coins that made up its base, glistening after being marinated in a tangy tomato and vinegar dressing. Housewives loved this dish because it could be made ahead, stored in the refrigerator, and pulled out whenever company dropped by. The carrots were sliced thin, then tossed with onion rings and chopped bell peppers before being soaked in the zesty red sauce. After chilling, the flavors melded together, creating a sweet, sour bite that felt refreshing alongside heavier dishes like fried chicken or pork chops. It was a favorite for picnics because it traveled well and only tasted better after a day in the fridge. Children often ignored plain carrots, but the bright dressing and peppers made them exciting enough to try. Copper penny salad was thrifty, flavorful, and attractive in a way that made it a staple of mid-century tables. Though rarely spotted today, it once represented the cleverness of turning a humble carrot into the star of the meal. Congealed lime salad was one of those quirky mid-century creations that blended sweet and savory into something unusual but beloved. It started with lime gelatin, bright and wobbly, then mixed with cream cheese, crushed pineapple, and chopped walnuts. The result was a pastel green mold that appeared on holiday buffets, church potlucks, and even wedding receptions. The tart lime balanced with the creaminess of cheese, while the pineapple added a sweet burst and the walnuts gave a little crunch. It was always set in decorative molds, which turned it into a centerpiece as much as a side dish. Children loved poking it, while adults appreciated the novelty of it being both salad and dessert. Congealed lime salad reflected the experimental spirit of kitchens in the 60s and 70s, when gelatin was the base for all sorts of imaginative recipes. Though many now smile at its oddity, it was once cherished for its creativity and the joy it brought to the table. Macaroni and tomatoes was one of the simplest dishes ever served, yet it carried deep meaning in resourceful kitchens. Elbow pasta was boiled until tender, then simmered with stewed tomatoes, onions, and a touch of seasoning. It was cheap, easy, and satisfying, a way to stretch pantry ingredients into something warm and filling. This dish often appeared on weeknights when money was tight, providing comfort without extravagance. Its flavors were mild but hearty, with the sweet tomatoes coating every bite of pasta. Some families sprinkled a little cheese on top, while others kept it plain to save costs. It was not glamorous, but it was dependable, showing how much could be done with just a can of tomatoes and a box of pasta. Children grew up with it as a staple, and for many it became tied to memories of home. Today it has nearly vanished from dinner tables, but macaroni and tomatoes once stood proudly as proof that simplicity could taste like love. Frog eye salad was one of the most memorable creations ever to appear at church gatherings and holiday tables. Despite its unusual name, it was simply tiny acini di pepe pasta tossed with fruit, custard, and whipped topping. The little pasta beads looked like frog eyes, giving the dish its playful name. Cans of pineapple, mandarin oranges, and sometimes cherries were folded in, making it sweet and colorful. Families loved how it combined pantry staples into something that seemed exotic and fun for the time. The creamy custard coated every bite, while the fruit added bursts of freshness. It became especially popular at family reunions, where large bowls could feed dozens with ease. Children always reached for it first, delighted by its sweetness, while adults appreciated its light but filling nature. Frog eye salad may sound strange today, but it once brought joy, laughter, and a splash of color to community tables across America. Three bean salad was the classic side dish of the 70s, known for its bright colors and sweet, tangy flavor. It was made with green beans, yellow wax beans, and red kidney beans, all tossed in a vinegar-sugar dressing with chopped onions. The salad was chilled before serving, allowing the flavors to soak into the beans. It appeared at every picnic, potluck, and family reunion, admired for its beauty and simplicity. The beans gave it protein and substance, while the dressing balanced sour with sweet in a way that paired with almost any main dish. Families loved it because it kept well, even without refrigeration for a few hours, making it perfect for outdoor events. It was thrifty, attractive, and easy to make in large batches. Today, three bean salad is rarely made, but it once symbolized togetherness and the art of making vegetables taste exciting. Broccoli rice casserole was a favorite in the 70s when canned soups were a staple in every kitchen. This dish combined rice, broccoli florets, cream of mushroom soup, and a layer of melted cheese baked on top. It was hearty, creamy, and filling, perfect for serving a family on a budget. The broccoli made it seem healthy, even though the richness of the soup and cheese turned it into indulgence. It became a holiday favorite, appearing at Thanksgiving or Christmas as the green side dish everyone expected. Children often learned to eat broccoli for the first time through this casserole, thanks to the cheesy topping. It was easy to prepare ahead and pop in the oven, making it ideal for busy households. Broccoli rice casserole represented the convenience cooking of the era, where canned goods and casseroles ruled the table. Though it has faded, it remains one of the iconic forgotten side dishes no one makes anymore. Corn pudding was once the pride of holiday tables, a creamy custard baked from fresh or canned corn mixed with eggs, milk, and a touch of sugar. It was sweet, savory, and comforting, bridging the gap between a vegetable and a dessert. Families served it at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Sunday dinners, where it became a symbol of warmth and tradition. The top baked into a golden crust, while the inside stayed soft and custardy, almost like spoon bread. It was a side dish that felt special, even though it used the simplest of ingredients. Generations grew up with corn pudding as a reminder of festive meals shared together. It was easy to make, but always impressive, showing the magic of turning corn into something extraordinary. Today, it has slipped from holiday spreads, but its memory lingers in cookbooks and in the stories of those who once scooped it proudly at family gatherings. Carrot raisin salad was a bright and sweet side dish that families often served at picnics or potlucks. It was made by mixing shredded carrots with raisins, pineapple chunks, and mayonnaise, creating a combination of creamy, tangy, and sweet flavors. The salad was light but satisfying, a refreshing contrast to heavier meats and casseroles. Children especially loved the raisins and pineapple, while parents appreciated how inexpensive and easy it was to prepare. It became a summer staple because it could be served chilled, staying cool and crisp in the heat. Carrot raisin salad reflected the creativity of stretching simple ingredients into something fun and flavorful. It was often written into community cookbooks and passed down as a reliable recipe for gatherings. Over time, tastes changed and mayonnaise-based salads lost popularity, but carrot raisin salad once stood as a bright symbol of shared meals and clever kitchen thrift. Baked pineapple casserole was one of those quirky dishes that balanced sweet and savory in a way that only mid-century kitchens dared to attempt. Families layered canned pineapple chunks with cubes of white bread and sharp cheddar cheese, then baked it until golden and bubbly. The cheese melted into the bread while the pineapple juices soaked through, creating a rich texture that was both gooey and tangy. It often appeared at Easter or Christmas alongside ham, where its sweet flavor paired perfectly with salty meats. Children loved the pineapple, while adults marveled at how something so odd could taste so good. It was practical too, since it stretched canned fruit into a side dish big enough to feed a crowd. Though it may sound unusual today, baked pineapple casserole was once a treasured example of how creative and daring home cooks could be with everyday ingredients. Potato salad with pickle juice was a Southern classic that delivered a tangy punch to an old favorite. Potatoes were boiled, cubed, and mixed with chopped eggs, celery, onions, and plenty of mayonnaise. The secret was adding brine straight from the pickle jar, which sharpened the flavors and gave the salad a brightness regular vinegar could not match. Some families used dill, others swore by sweet pickles, but both created a taste that stood out at picnics and church suppers. This salad was always served chilled, heaped into big bowls, and decorated with paprika on top for color. It paired well with barbecue, fried chicken, or anything pulled from the grill, making it a staple of summer gatherings. Over time, store-bought versions of potato salad became common, and the pickle juice trick faded. Yet once, this simple addition turned potato salad into something unforgettable. Tomato aspic was a dish that baffled outsiders but was once a proud part of American dining. Made by mixing tomato juice, gelatin, spices, and sometimes vegetables, it was poured into molds and chilled until firm. The result was a savory, wobbly creation served in slices like salad. Families often brought it out for holidays, where its bright red color looked festive on the table. It was tangy, spicy, and refreshing, often paired with lettuce or cottage cheese. Housewives loved it because it was inexpensive, kept well in the refrigerator, and could be prepared ahead of time. Children might have turned up their noses, but adults appreciated its unique flavor and presentation. Tomato aspic may seem strange today, but in the 1960s and 1970s, it was a sign of sophistication, showing how adventurous cooks could be with gelatin. Shoestring potato casserole was a thrifty invention that used canned shoestring potatoes as its base. These thin strips of fried potatoes were layered into a casserole dish with cream soup, onions, and cheese, then baked until bubbling. The result was a crunchy, creamy side dish that was hearty enough to stand next to meatloaf or roast beef. Families enjoyed how easy it was to put together, requiring only pantry staples and a little oven time. It was a comfort food favorite at weeknight dinners, where children eagerly scooped up spoonfuls of crispy potatoes covered in sauce. The casserole was also popular at church suppers, where it could feed many without costing much. Though it has nearly vanished today, shoestring potato casserole once represented the creativity of stretching canned goods into meals that felt homemade and filling. Sweet and sour red cabbage was a Midwest staple that combined bold color with bold flavor. Heads of red cabbage were shredded and braised with vinegar, sugar, and sometimes apples, creating a dish that was tangy, slightly sweet, and deeply comforting. The long cooking turned the cabbage tender and infused every bite with flavor. It was often served alongside pork chops or sausages, where its acidity cut through the richness of the meat. Families passed this recipe down through generations, linking it to both German heritage and American practicality. It was thrifty, nutritious, and added brightness to otherwise heavy meals. The deep purple color made it stand out on the dinner table, reminding everyone that side dishes could be both pretty and flavorful. Though it has faded from modern menus, sweet and sour red cabbage was once a proud symbol of regional cooking. Pea and cheese salad was a bright, creamy dish that appeared at countless potlucks and holiday dinners. Frozen or canned peas were thawed and mixed with cubes of cheddar cheese, chopped onions, and mayonnaise. Sometimes hard-boiled eggs or bacon were added, but the heart of the salad was the sweet peas against the salty cheese. Served chilled, it was refreshing and hearty at the same time, making it a favorite on hot days or crowded tables. Families loved it because it came together quickly and could be made ahead. It was often served in big bowls at reunions, where its familiar taste brought comfort to everyone. Children were more willing to eat peas when mixed with cheese and creamy dressing, making it a clever way to get vegetables onto their plates. Today, it is rarely made, but pea and cheese salad once stood proudly among classic American side dishes. Spinach Madeleine was one of the most iconic Southern side dishes of the mid-20th century. Fresh or frozen spinach was cooked down and blended with cream, butter, and the famous jalapeno cheese roll that gave it a spicy, tangy flavor. Baked until bubbly, it was creamy, rich, and unlike any other vegetable dish on the table. Families often served it at holidays, where its bold taste made it stand out among casseroles and breads. Spinach Madeleine was created in Louisiana and spread quickly through community cookbooks, becoming a treasured recipe of the region. It showed how simple vegetables could be elevated with creativity and a little heat. Though jalapeno cheese roll has disappeared from most grocery stores, the recipe lives on in memory as a clever and flavorful twist on spinach. Cucumber and onion salad was a simple but refreshing side that families turned to during hot summers. Thinly sliced cucumbers were tossed with onion rings, vinegar, sugar, and dill, then chilled until crisp and tangy. It was cool, light, and perfect for balancing heavier dishes like fried chicken or ribs. Families often grew cucumbers in backyard gardens, making this salad a natural way to use up the harvest. It was quick to prepare and inexpensive, yet it delivered big flavor and a satisfying crunch. At reunions and church picnics, it was a familiar favorite, easy to serve in large bowls. Children sometimes found it too tangy, but adults appreciated its refreshing bite. Though overshadowed today by modern salads, cucumber and onion salad was once a summer essential in homes across America. Stuffed celery sticks were a favorite party platter item from the 1960s through the 1980s. Celery stalks were filled with cream cheese, pimento spread, or even peanut butter, then arranged neatly on trays. They were crunchy, creamy, and easy to pick up with fingers, making them perfect for cocktail parties or church socials. Families also made them for holiday gatherings, where they added a bright green color to snack tables. Stuffed celery was practical, inexpensive, and endlessly adaptable, depending on what was in the refrigerator. It was often one of the first things children grabbed, thanks to the creamy fillings. Over time, this dish faded from popularity, replaced by more elaborate appetizers. Still, stuffed celery sticks once symbolized the charm of simple entertaining done with care. Zucchini fritters were a clever way to turn surplus garden vegetables into something crisp and delicious. Grated zucchini was mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasoning, then pan-fried into golden patties. They were crunchy on the outside and tender inside, making them irresistible as a side dish or snack. Families discovered them in the height of summer when gardens overflowed with zucchini. Instead of wasting the bounty, home cooks created a recipe that celebrated it. The fritters could be eaten plain, dipped in sauces, or served with meats, making them versatile and popular. Children who resisted zucchini often loved the fritters, proving the trick worked. Though not as common today, zucchini fritters once stood as a perfect example of kitchen resourcefulness and seasonal cooking at its best. Cauliflower au gratin was once the star of Sunday dinners, a dish that turned a plain vegetable into something rich and elegant. Florets of cauliflower were steamed until tender, then baked in a creamy white sauce and topped with a layer of melted cheddar or breadcrumbs. It came bubbling out of the oven, golden and irresistible, served in casserole dishes big enough to feed the whole family. The recipe was passed down in cookbooks and often appeared at holiday tables, where it was remembered as both thrifty and impressive. For children, it was one of the few ways cauliflower actually seemed exciting, while adults enjoyed how it felt indulgent without being expensive. Over time, cauliflower became trendy in new forms like pizza crusts and rice substitutes, but the gratin has mostly disappeared. It was once a reminder that vegetables could shine with a little cheese, butter, and patience in the kitchen. Hot German potato salad was a dish that carried warmth both in temperature and flavor. Unlike traditional chilled versions, this salad was served hot, made with sliced potatoes tossed in a tangy vinegar dressing enriched with bacon and onions. It was hearty, savory, and perfect alongside sausages or roasted chicken. The salad was especially popular at church suppers and summer picnics, where its bold flavor stood out among milder dishes. Families of German heritage passed it down through generations, but it was widely enjoyed by many in the Midwest and beyond. It combined thrift with flavor, stretching simple potatoes into a dish that satisfied everyone at the table. Over the decades, as mayonnaise-based potato salads dominated, the warm vinegar version quietly slipped away. Yet for those who remember it, hot German potato salad represented the charm of home-style cooking where nothing was wasted and every bite carried comfort. Molded cranberry salad was a mid-century classic that combined convenience with presentation. Canned cranberry sauce was blended with gelatin, crushed pineapple, nuts, and sometimes a splash of orange peel, then poured into decorative molds to set. The result was a shimmering ruby-red creation that held its shape when sliced. It became a regular feature at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, served alongside turkey as a sweet tart balance. Children loved its jelly-like wobble, while adults appreciated the nutty crunch and festive look. Housewives prized it because it was inexpensive, easy to prepare ahead of time, and impressive when turned out onto a platter. Over the years, cranberry salad became less common as fresher side dishes gained favor, but for decades it was the pride of many holiday tables. Its disappearance is one of those quiet shifts that mark how traditions fade, even ones that once defined the season. Succotash was once a staple of American tables, though today it is rarely made outside of a few regional kitchens. At its heart, the dish was nothing more than sweet corn and lima beans simmered slowly with butter, salt, and pepper, but it carried traditions that stretched across centuries. Native American communities introduced the pairing, and African American cooks preserved and adapted it, turning it into a side dish that spoke of both survival and celebration. Sometimes cream was added for richness, or bacon for a smoky depth, but it remained simple, nourishing, and colorful. Families prepared it in the summer when gardens overflowed, and many canned jars of it to pull out in the winter when fresh vegetables were scarce. It was humble, yet it appeared at Sunday dinners, reunions, and even holiday tables, proof that thrift did not have to mean blandness. Children grew up recognizing its bright mix of yellow and green on their plates, a reminder of the seasons. Over time, it began to feel old-fashioned, crowded out by casseroles and convenience foods. Yet, in its heyday, succotash symbolized resourcefulness, cultural heritage, and the art of making a meal from the simplest harvests. Marinated mushrooms became a hit during the 1970s, an era when bold flavors and clever make-ahead recipes were celebrated. Small button mushrooms were quickly blanched, then bathed in a marinade of vinegar, garlic, olive oil, and herbs until they soaked up every drop of tangy flavor. Served chilled, they appeared glossy and elegant, standing out on buffet tables, picnic spreads, and cocktail trays. They carried a touch of Mediterranean influence, which at the time felt fashionable and sophisticated, yet the ingredients were inexpensive and accessible. Housewives liked them because they could be made in advance, leaving time for other dishes, and they kept well in jars or bowls until serving. Community cookbooks were filled with variations, some adding red pepper flakes, others experimenting with dill or mustard seeds. Families brought them to reunions and church suppers, where they impressed without costing much. Over time, though, marinated mushrooms slipped away, replaced by convenience appetizers bought at grocery stores. They are rarely seen now, yet they once represented how a simple vegetable could be elevated with nothing more than patience and a clever brine. Their fading is a reminder of how quickly tastes and traditions can shift. Pineapple carrot gelatin salad was one of those colorful creations that seemed to appear on every church supper table or holiday buffet in the 1960s and 1970s. Housewives grated carrots by hand, stirred them into lime or orange gelatin, and folded in crushed pineapple for sweetness. Sometimes a ribbon of mayonnaise or whipped cream was added, turning it into a pastel creation that balanced tangy, sweet, and creamy flavors all at once. Set in decorative molds, it wobbled proudly in the middle of tables, drawing curious stares and plenty of comments. Children found it both fascinating and confusing, unsure why carrots were hiding in something that looked like dessert. Adults enjoyed the cheerful presentation, appreciating how practical it was to prepare ahead of time. It traveled easily and always held its shape, making it a favorite for community events. It was a recipe that showed both thrift and imagination, stretching inexpensive canned fruit and gelatin into a side dish that could feed dozens. Though it has almost completely disappeared today, those who remember it can still picture the shimmering green or orange molds on family tables, symbols of a time when even vegetables could wobble their way into celebration. Green bean almondine was once seen as the height of elegance, a dish borrowed from French kitchens but embraced wholeheartedly by American cooks during the mid-20th century. Fresh green beans were blanched until tender and then sautéed gently in butter until glossy and fragrant. Toasted almonds were sprinkled on top, giving each bite a crunch that made the humble beans feel like something special. Housewives loved how quickly it came together, yet how impressive it looked when served at Sunday dinners, weddings, or neighborhood dinner parties. It was a recipe that made vegetables seem glamorous, proving that with a little care, even the simplest produce could shine. Community cookbooks proudly included it, often underlined with notes about how fancy it appeared on a plate. Over the years, though, canned green beans and heavy casseroles took its place at most family tables. The refined almondine slipped into obscurity, remembered mostly by those who once admired its elegance. Yet, in its prime, it represented a moment when home cooking reached for a bit of European sophistication, and it taught families that vegetables could deserve the same spotlight as meats or desserts. Yellow squash casserole was one of those dishes that defined Southern summers, a way of turning garden excess into comfort food that fed whole families. Squash grew in abundance, and rather than waste it, cooks sliced it thin, layered it with onions, added a scattering of breadcrumbs, a generous splash of butter, and of course plenty of cheese before baking it until bubbling and golden. The result was creamy, hearty, and packed with flavor, yet light enough to serve alongside roasts, fried chicken, or even as part of a holiday spread. Families often relied on it as both a practical way to use the overflowing harvest and as a tradition that tied meals to the rhythms of the garden. At reunions and church dinners, large pans of it disappeared quickly, proving it was loved by both children and adults alike. Its popularity endured for decades before gradually fading as new vegetables and fresher trends pushed it aside. Yet for those who remember, yellow squash casserole was not just a side dish, it was a reminder of community, thrift, and the satisfaction of transforming humble garden vegetables into something warm and celebratory. Pickled beets and eggs were one of the most eye-catching side dishes ever served, their vibrant color making them stand out on any table. Hard-boiled eggs were placed into jars filled with beet brine, where they slowly transformed into shades of bright pink, the color seeping all the way through to the yolk. Alongside them, slices of pickled beets brought tang and sweetness that balanced the richness of meats or casseroles. The dish was especially beloved in Pennsylvania Dutch communities and African American kitchens, where pickling traditions carried deep cultural roots. Housewives appreciated how practical it was, since the eggs kept well in jars and could feed large families over several days. They were both thrifty and beautiful, a rare combination that made them staples at holiday spreads, potlucks, and Sunday dinners. Over the years, as home pickling became less common, this dish faded into curiosity. Today, it is remembered mostly in stories and a few regional cookbooks, but once it was a proud symbol of resourcefulness, heritage, and the art of making food beautiful as well as nourishing. mock crab salad became a household favorite during the 1970s, when families were experimenting with new, affordable ways to bring excitement to their tables. Real crab was too costly for many, so imitation crab made from white fish provided a clever substitute. Housewives mixed it with mayonnaise, diced celery, onions, and sometimes pasta, creating a creamy salad that mimicked the flavor of the real thing. Served cold, it quickly became a hit at parties, luncheons, and buffets, where its mild sweetness and familiar creaminess appealed to crowds. It was especially popular at church socials, where large bowls could be made for little money and still feel indulgent. Children enjoyed it too, as the pasta base and gentle flavor felt comforting and approachable. Over time, imitation crab lost its novelty, and the salad slipped out of fashion, replaced by trendier appetizers. But in its day, mock crab salad represented both thrift and creativity, proving families could enjoy a taste of luxury. Harvard beets were the kind of side dish you either loved with all your heart or politely pushed around the plate. But back in Grandma's day, they were something special. Tender beets, simmered in a glossy, sweet and sour sauce made of sugar, vinegar, and a touch of butter or cornstarch for thickness. Sometimes cloves or allspice were added, giving them a spiced holiday feel that filled the room the moment they hit the stove. These beets had a deep ruby color that practically glowed in the bowl, and they were often served warm alongside pot roast or meatloaf. You would see them at church suppers, family holidays, or just because someone had canned a good harvest. They were a lesson in thrift too, stretching garden beets through the winter with just a few pantry ingredients. People used to say Harvard beets were named after the university, but no one ever really cared. What mattered was that they gave even humble root vegetables a bit of elegance and shine. These days, you are more likely to see beets roasted with goat cheese than nestled in a sticky glaze. Macaroni and tomatoes was the forgotten side that kept dinner plates full when grocery budgets were stretched thin. You would boil macaroni, toss it with stewed tomatoes, a pat of butter, and maybe onions or cheese if you had extra. It was not glamorous, but it got the job done. You could find this simple pasta side in old community cookbooks from the 40s through the 70s, tucked between casserole recipes and Jell-O molds. Families loved it because it used pantry staples, cost little, and made meals stretch farther. It showed up next to pork chops, meatloaf, or whatever leftovers you had. Macaroni and tomatoes was the quiet hero of the table, filling bellies when money was tight. You do not see it much now, but in its day it was a practical filling side that showed how far folks could go with a box of pasta and a can of tomatoes. Tomato soup with cracker crumble was the ultimate quick fix when groceries were low and appetites were high. You heated up a can of tomato soup, crushed some saltines over the top, and called it a meal. It sounds basic, but it hit the spot. Grandma's cookbook was full of these quick, practical recipes that stretched every last pantry staple, and this one was no exception. The saltines soaked up the soup, adding just enough crunch and thickness to make it filling. Parents loved it because it cost next to nothing and came together in 10 minutes flat. Kids loved it because it was warm, salty, and familiar. You could always dress it up with a sprinkle of cheese or some pepper, but most families kept it plain and simple. It was the kind of meal you would find after school, in chilly weather, or on those nights when there just was not time for anything else. Fast, affordable, and quietly forgotten, like so many of the recipes tucked into the back pages of Grandma's old cookbook. Deviled potato salad put a zesty spin on the traditional potato salad by adding a tangy mustard-based dressing that packed a flavorful punch. This vintage recipe took boiled potatoes and tossed them in a dressing made with yellow mustard, mayonnaise, vinegar, and seasonings to create a vibrant and slightly spicy side dish. Betty Crocker cookbooks celebrated deviled potato salad for its bold taste and easy preparation, making it a favorite at picnics, barbecues, and family gatherings. The mustard gave the creamy salad a lively kick that contrasted nicely with the soft potatoes, adding excitement to a classic comfort food. Often garnished with chopped chives or paprika, this salad brought both color and flavor to the table. It was a dish that pleased crowds by balancing creamy, tangy, and savory elements, all while remaining simple enough for home cooks to prepare in advance. Deviled potato salad remains a nostalgic reminder of inventive takes on beloved American classics. Roll-ups on white bread were a quick, sweet little snack that kept plenty of kids going when there was not much else to pack in their lunchbox. You took a slice of sandwich bread, rolled it flat with a rolling pin or a glass, spread on jelly, and rolled it up tight. That was all there was to it. It sounds simple now, but back then, this was the kind of treat that showed up when families had to stretch every dollar. It was fast, easy, and made use of pantry staples that were always on hand. You would find these roll-ups tucked into school lunches, brought to church picnics, or passed around as after-school snacks when groceries were running low. The jelly added sweetness, the bread kept it filling, and it all came together in just a few minutes. It might be forgotten today, but for plenty of families, these jelly roll-ups were a quick fix that kept kids happy and parents sane. Wilted lettuce salad with vinegar dressing was the forgotten side dish that brought warmth, tang, and a little bacon grease magic to family tables all across the South. You would take fresh lettuce, usually straight from the garden, pour hot bacon drippings mixed with vinegar, sugar, and a pinch of salt over the top, and watch the greens wilt down into tender, flavorful bites. It sounds odd to serve salad that way today, but back then, this was comfort food at its finest. Families leaned on recipes like this to use up garden produce, stretch ingredients, and add a hearty, savory side to meals without spending extra money. Wilted lettuce salad was a regular at potlucks, Sunday suppers, and backyard gatherings, sitting proudly next to fried chicken, biscuits, or whatever main dish folks scraped together. You could dress it up with sliced onions, hard-boiled eggs, or crumbled bacon when you had extra to spare. Dilled green beans were crisp, cold, and full of bite, the kind of dish that cut through a heavy meal and made you feel a little more awake. Grandma would blanch fresh green beans just until tender, then toss them in a marinade of vinegar, sugar, water, and plenty of fresh dill. Sometimes there was garlic too, or a few mustard seeds, but the real star was always the dill. The beans would soak overnight in the fridge and be served chilled the next day, usually from a glass bowl with little drops of condensation on the rim. They were bright, tangy, and a little bit sharp, perfect next to meatloaf, pork roast, or even a big baked potato. Dilled green beans were common in summer when the garden gave more than you could eat in one sitting. They were refreshing, frugal, and quietly sophisticated. Not quite a pickle, not quite a salad, just their own thing entirely. These days, they have almost vanished from potlucks and picnics, but the flavor still lingers if you ever get the chance to taste it again. Tomato aspic with celery and olives was one of those curious gelatin-based sides that ruled vintage cookbooks but slipped quietly off dinner tables as times changed. You would take savory tomato juice or seasoned broth, mix it with gelatin, and suspend chopped celery, olives, and sometimes hard-boiled eggs inside, then chill it in a mold until firm. It sounds strange now, but back in the 1950s and 60s, molded salads were a symbol of pride and resourcefulness, showing up at luncheons, holiday dinners, and potlucks all across America. Tomato aspic was considered elegant, even a little fancy, turning pantry staples into a glossy, structured side that balanced out roast meats, fried chicken, or whatever leftovers you had. Families leaned on recipes like this to stretch groceries and bring something unique to the table without spending a fortune. It looked impressive, it used affordable ingredients, and it made even the simplest meal feel dressed up. You might not see tomato aspic much today outside of retro cookbooks or quirky food blogs, but back then, it was proof that creativity and practicality ruled the kitchen, no matter how odd the presentation looked. Egg salad on toast was one of those practical 10-minute meals that filled lunch boxes, fed tired workers, and showed up in every community cookbook for good reason. Leftover boiled eggs were never wasted. You chopped them up, mixed them with mayonnaise, maybe a little mustard if you were lucky, and piled it all onto a slice of toast. It sounds plain, but it got the job done. The eggs were filling, the toast made it portable, and you could whip it up in no time flat. This was not about fancy ingredients or gourmet flavors. It was the kind of recipe people leaned on when money was tight, time was short, and families still had to eat. You would see it at church luncheons, quick weekday dinners, or scribbled down on worn recipe cards tucked into kitchen drawers. It might be forgotten now, but egg salad on toast kept plenty of households going when they needed it most. Baked sweet potato fries were a popular twist on the classic potato side, offering a sweet and savory alternative that baked to crispy perfection. Thinly sliced sweet potatoes were tossed in seasonings, often cinnamon, salt, or paprika, and baked until tender on the inside and slightly crisp on the edges. This healthier option appeared in many Betty Crocker cookbooks as a way to enjoy fries without deep frying, perfect for families seeking convenience and flavor. The natural sweetness of the potatoes paired beautifully with the warm spices, creating a comforting side that complemented both casual meals and special dinners. Baked sweet potato fries were easy to prepare and could be customized with various seasoning blends, making them versatile for many tastes. Their vibrant orange color brightened the plate, and the satisfying crunch made them a hit with kids and adults alike. These fries were a testament to how a simple vegetable could be transformed into a crowd-pleasing side that brought both nostalgia and a fresh twist to the table. Hominy casserole bake was one of those hearty, dependable sides that quietly held Southern kitchens together, especially when every meal had to count. You would take cooked hominy, mix it with shredded cheese, a little cream, top it with breadcrumbs, and bake it until bubbling and golden. It was simple, filling, and made sure nothing went to waste. Hominy casserole bake showed up at church suppers, family reunions, and holidays, especially in rural areas where pantry staples had to stretch. It might sound old-fashioned now, but this cheesy casserole was pure comfort on a plate, adding a little richness to meals built around fried meats, barbecue, or stews. You would find it in vintage cookbooks, passed down from neighbors or scribbled on recipe cards with curled edges. It has mostly slipped off dinner tables today, but back then it turned humble ingredients into something worth gathering around. Families leaned on simple dishes like this to bring warmth to the table without spending much. It filled bellies and brought people together, reminding everyone how far frugal, clever cooking could go. Creamed chipped carrots were never flashy, but they had their place in Grandma's dinner rotation. She would slice carrots thin, sometimes with a hand crank slicer, and simmer them until tender, then fold them into a creamy white sauce with butter and flour. The sauce was just enough to coat the carrots without drowning them, adding a gentle richness that softened their natural sweetness. You would find them beside meatloaf or roast turkey, sometimes served in little ramekins or scooped straight from a saucepan. It was a quiet dish, comforting in a way that did not ask for attention. No spices, no tricks, just care, warmth, and the steady flavor of carrots made special. They were easy to prepare, cheap to make, and always familiar. These days, carrots are raw in lunchboxes or roasted with glaze, but the creamed version is nearly forgotten. Yet there was a time when this simple dish brought real joy to the table. It deserves more than silence. Cornflake-topped vegetable medley was the crunchy, thrifty side dish that showed up at potlucks and family dinners, straight from those old spiral-bound cookbooks. You would take canned or frozen vegetables, stir them with cream sauce, pour it into a casserole dish, and finish it with a layer of crushed cornflakes before baking. It sounds unusual now, but back then, this topping was genius. It added crunch, stretched ingredients, and turned plain vegetables into something hearty. Cornflake-topped vegetable medley earned its spot at the table because it made basic produce feel dressed up enough for guests or holidays. It sat proudly next to meatloaf, roast turkey, or ham, offering crispy contrast to heavier mains. Families loved it for how easy it was to throw together, how well it traveled to potlucks, and how much kids liked the crunchy topping. You hardly see it now, but back then, that golden cornflake crust meant you brought your best, even when groceries were tight. It proved simple ingredients could still make a meal feel special and complete. Mayo and lettuce sandwiches were one of those simple, no-nonsense Depression-era meals that somehow filled you up when there was not much else to work with. You slapped some mayonnaise on soft sandwich bread, added a few crisp iceberg lettuce leaves, and called it lunch. That was it. It might sound plain today, But back when grocery shelves were bare and paychecks were stretched thin, this quick little meal showed up on a lot of kitchen tables. Families made do with what they had, and mayonnaise gave the sandwich some fat and flavor while lettuce added crunch and made it feel fresh. It was cheap, fast, and surprisingly satisfying when times were tough. You would see it scribbled onto old recipe cards or passed down through word of mouth as a quick lunch fix that cost next to nothing. These sandwiches are mostly forgotten now, but back then, they were a lifesaver that came together in under 10 minutes. Jelly roll celery and walnut salad was a classic side that brought crunch and creaminess together in perfect harmony. Crisp celery stalks were sliced thin and mixed with crunchy walnuts, then tossed in a light mayonnaise or yogurt dressing, creating a refreshing contrast in textures. This salad was often a staple in Betty Crocker cookbooks, celebrated for its ease and the satisfying bite it added to any meal. The cool, slightly bitter celery balanced the rich, buttery walnuts, while the creamy dressing tied it all together with a touch of tang. It was a favored side for holiday dinners and everyday meals alike, offering a healthy option that was still indulgent enough to feel like a treat. The nutty flavor of walnuts brought depth, and the salad's pale green hues added a fresh pop of color to the dinner plate. Its simple yet elegant nature made it beloved by home cooks seeking something light and wholesome to complement heartier mains. Corn oysters were one of those Depression-era dishes that did not have a lick of seafood but still felt like something fancy. Grandma would mix corn, usually fresh or canned, with eggs, flour, and a bit of milk to make a thick batter. Then she would fry little spoonfuls in hot oil or bacon grease until they puffed up golden and crispy around the edges. The name came from the way they looked, round, plump, and golden, like a fried oyster. But they were made of nothing more than corn and love. These fritters were often served as a side dish with soup or meatloaf, or even stacked up for breakfast. They were quick to make, easy to stretch, and always got eaten before they had time to cool. Kids loved them, adults counted on them, and they used up whatever corn you had on hand. Some folks added chopped peppers or onions for extra flavor, but the original was good enough all by itself. Corn oysters were proof that you did not need much to make something satisfying. You just needed a hot pan, a good spoon, and a little bit of memory. Corn oysters were one of those Depression-era dishes that did not have a lick of seafood but still felt like something fancy. Grandma would mix corn, usually fresh or canned, with eggs, flour, and a bit of milk to make a thick batter. Then she would fry little spoonfuls in hot oil or bacon grease until they puffed up golden and crispy around the edges. The name came from the way they looked, round, plump, and golden, like a fried oyster. But they were made of nothing more than corn and love. These fritters were often served as a side dish with soup or meatloaf, or even stacked up for breakfast. They were quick to make, easy to stretch, and always got eaten before they had time to cool. Kids loved them, adults counted on them, and they used up whatever corn you had on hand. Some folks added chopped peppers or onions for extra flavor, but the original was good enough all by itself. Corn oysters were proof that you did not need much to make something satisfying. You just needed a hot pan, a good spoon, and a little bit of memory. Mashed rutabagas were a less common but beloved vintage side dish that brought a buttery, creamy twist to a hearty root vegetable. This mashed treat was a staple in many Betty Crocker cookbooks, especially during times when variety was sought beyond the usual potatoes. Rutabagas, with their slightly sweet and earthy flavor, were boiled and mashed with butter and cream to create a smooth, comforting side that paired beautifully with roasted meats and stews. Their pale yellow color and mild taste made them a subtle yet satisfying addition to any plate. Unlike the more familiar mashed potatoes, rutabagas offered a slightly different texture and a hint of natural sweetness that made the dish feel special. It was a side that echoed simpler times and frugal kitchens, where every ingredient was stretched and savored. Mashed rutabagas stood as a testament to vintage American cooking's ability to find comfort in unexpected places. Sour cream noodle bake was the kind of creamy, carb-loaded side dish that quietly filled plates and bellies all across America, especially at mid-century potlucks and family dinners. You would boil up egg noodles, toss them with sour cream, butter, chives, and sometimes a little cheese, then bake the whole thing until warm and bubbling with golden edges. It was pure comfort food, straight from the faded pages of those old spiral-bound cookbooks that promised to stretch your groceries and still bring something hearty to the table. Sour cream noodle bake balanced creamy richness with just enough tang, making it a perfect side for roast chicken, pork chops, or fried meats when times were lean. Families leaned on recipes like this because it was affordable, filling, and easy to whip up with pantry staples, especially when grocery budgets were tight and every meal needed to count. You would find it at church dinners, neighborhood potlucks, or scribbled on index cards tucked in recipe boxes, quietly holding its place as a dependable, cozy side dish. It slipped off most menus today, but back then, it made every plate feel just a little more complete. Cheesy cauliflower gratin was a rich and indulgent vegetable side that found a special place in many vintage kitchens. Tender cauliflower florets were smothered in a creamy, cheesy sauce before being baked under a crispy layer of toasted breadcrumbs. This gratin was a perfect example of comfort food, combining the mild flavor of cauliflower with the lusciousness of melted cheese and a golden, crunchy top. Betty Crocker cookbooks featured this dish as a versatile accompaniment for both everyday meals and holiday feasts. Its creamy texture and cheesy goodness made it a hit with both children and adults, especially those who might usually shy away from vegetables. The gratin's warm, bubbling surface was a welcome sight at any dinner table, signaling a dish full of hearty flavor and home-style care. This recipe demonstrated how simple vegetables could be transformed into something special and satisfying, making cheesy cauliflower gratin a nostalgic classic worth revisiting. Green bean and mushroom casserole without the soup was the forgotten, homemade version of a side dish families leaned on before canned shortcuts took over. You would cook fresh green beans, sauté mushrooms with butter and onions, stir in cream sauce from scratch, and bake it all with crisp breadcrumbs or fried onions. It was hearty, practical, and made with real ingredients long before condensed soups became a shortcut. This casserole showed up at Sunday dinners, holidays, and potlucks, sitting next to roast meats or ham, adding creamy, comforting balance to every bite. Families loved it for stretching produce, filling plates, and making even basic meals feel special. The homemade version faded when convenience cooking took over, but back then, it was pure comfort with none of the shortcuts. You hardly see it now unless you are flipping through vintage cookbooks or swapping recipes with your grandmother, but once upon a time, this casserole was proof that simple, honest food could steal the show. Breaded eggplant rounds were a summer favorite that tasted like fried sunshine. Grandma would slice eggplants into thick coins, dip them in egg and breadcrumbs, sometimes with a bit of cornmeal, and fry them until golden and crisp. They were salty on the outside, creamy on the inside, and just hearty enough to stand in for meat when money was tight. You could serve them on their own, with tomato sauce, or tucked into a sandwich with melted cheese. They were messy to make and disappeared faster than she could fry them. The best ones were fresh from the garden, deep purple and still warm from the sun. Eggplant was not always a kid favorite, but this dish changed minds quickly. It was comfort food with a little bit of crunch and a lot of history. Today, eggplant shows up more in global recipes than in Grandma's style of home cooking. But back then, it was a clever way to make something simple feel satisfying. 3 bean molded salad was one of those curious creations from vintage cookbooks that made vegetables and gelatin collide in the strangest way. You would take the classic 3-bean salad, green beans, wax beans, kidney beans, and suspend the whole thing in lemon or lime-flavored gelatin, set it in a mold, and proudly serve it at potlucks or family dinners. Back in the 1950s and 60s, molded salads were a rite of passage in every community cookbook, and this one was no different. It looked fancy, stretched pantry staples, and made sure not a single bean went to waste. People loved it for the bright colors, wobbly texture, and how it sat proudly next to roast meats or casseroles. It might sound a little off-putting now, but back then, molded salads were considered practical and even impressive. This one in particular packed protein, vegetables, and a little retro flair all in one strange, shimmering dish. You might not see it outside of vintage recipe cards today, but once upon a time, it was the talk of every potluck. Quick macaroni and stewed tomatoes was one of those meals that showed up when there was not much left in the pantry, but families still needed dinner on the table fast. You boiled some elbow macaroni, opened a can of stewed tomatoes, and stirred it all together with salt, pepper, and a little butter if you could spare it. That was it. It sounds humble, but back when budgets were tight and grocery trips were rare, this simple stovetop meal came through. The pasta filled you up, the tomatoes added flavor, and it all came together in under 10 minutes. You would find recipes like this scribbled in old cookbooks, passed down from one generation to the next, or clipped from women's magazines that promised fast, filling meals on a shoestring budget. It might seem plain now, but quick macaroni and stewed tomatoes helped plenty of families stretch their groceries and make dinner happen, even on the hardest days. Cheese and pineapple skewers were a fun and flavorful appetizer side that perfectly blended sweet and savory notes. Cubed cheese, often cheddar or a mild American variety, was paired with juicy pineapple chunks on toothpicks, creating bite-sized delights that were both refreshing and rich. This combination featured prominently in Betty Crocker cookbooks as a party favorite and an easy-to-prepare hors d'oeuvre. The sharpness of the cheese contrasted with the tropical sweetness of the pineapple, making every bite a balanced explosion of flavors. These skewers were popular at potlucks, holiday gatherings, and casual get-togethers, offering a colorful and attractive option that was simple yet sophisticated. The ease of assembly made them a go-to for hosts wanting to impress without fuss. Their combination of textures, creamy cheese and juicy fruit, made for an unexpectedly delightful treat that could easily double as a side dish or a snack. Cornmeal mush was a dish born out of need but remembered for its quiet comfort. Grandma would cook cornmeal slowly with water or milk until it thickened into a soft porridge, then pour it into a pan to chill overnight. By morning, it would be firm enough to slice, and she would fry it in a hot skillet until the edges turned crisp and golden. It was eaten with butter, syrup, or even a fried egg on top, whatever the pantry allowed. This was not flashy food, it was sustenance, plain and simple. But it filled bellies, warmed cold mornings, and never cost more than a few cents to make. Some people grew up thinking of it as Southern fare, others knew it as polenta, but in Grandma's kitchen it was just cornmeal mush. It showed up at breakfast more often than not, especially during lean months. These days, it is almost never mentioned outside of old cookbooks or Appalachian food blogs. But it deserves a second look. Few dishes stretch so far, last so long, or feel quite so honest on a plate. Corn pudding casserole was the side dish that made even the humblest dinner plate feel warm and complete. If you flipped through old recipe cards tucked behind flour jars, chances are this one was written in your grandmother's handwriting. It combined sweet corn, butter, eggs, and milk into a creamy bake that sat proudly next to roast ham or pork chops. It was easy, affordable, and filled bellies, making it a go-to for potlucks, church suppers, and holidays. The top baked up golden brown, the inside stayed soft and rich, and every bite reminded you how folks pulled meals together from what they had. Corn pudding casserole carried meals through tough times, earning its place in kitchens from the Depression to the 70s. You do not see it much now, but back then, that creamy baked corn meant comfort on a plate. Hot dog and baked bean skillet was one of those quirky 10-minute meals that could only have come from Grandma's old cookbook. You sliced up hot dogs, tossed them in a skillet, and poured in a can of baked beans. That was it. Dinner done. It sounds ridiculous now, but back when money was tight and every meal counted, this was comfort food at its quickest. The beans were filling, the hot dogs gave you just enough protein, and you could stretch one can to feed the whole family. Some folks got fancy with mustard or onions, but most kept it plain. It was the kind of dish that showed up after a long workday, when you were too tired to fuss with complicated recipes but still needed to put something on the table. It bubbled away on the stove, filling the kitchen with that warm, smoky smell that meant dinner was ready. Today, it feels like one of those meals we forgot on purpose, but for families back then, It was a lifesaver that showed up fast and kept bellies full. Orange Jell-O salad was a shining star of many a mid-century dinner spread, bringing a burst of sunshine to the table. This side dish combined citrusy gelatin with crushed pineapple or mandarin oranges, offering a sweet and tangy profile that refreshed the palate between heavier courses. The translucent orange hue gleamed under the dining room light, hinting at the fruity delight within. It was common to find recipes in Betty Crocker cookbooks encouraging creative additions like mini marshmallows, shredded coconut, or chopped nuts for added texture. The cool, wobbly nature of the Jell-O made it a playful contrast to the warm, savory mains. This salad was often served chilled, providing a moment of lightness and joy during meals where meat and potatoes dominated. Kids loved it for its sweetness and fun texture, while adults appreciated the nostalgia it evoked. Its simplicity made it a go-to for busy home cooks, and its bright flavor profile helped lift spirits, especially during winter months. Orange Jell-O salad was truly a dessert and a side dish all wrapped in one delightful package, without breaking the budget. Today, it lingers as a snapshot of ingenuity, nostalgia, and the changing flavors of American kitchens in that remarkable era. Drop your favorite side dish in the comments, give that like button a good stir, and subscribe for another helping of food nostalgia.